MMOs and fantasy games allow players to enter a world different from their current reality. In these types of games, a player will choose a character, building a look, playstyle, and a story to go along with it. Some games allow players to run wild with these ideas, letting them create a vastly different and personalised characters. On the flip side, other games provide a more structured and predetermined identity depending on what type of character the player chooses. World of Warcraft is one of the most notable MMOs in the past 2 decades. And the lore-rich backstory began with the Warcraft 1, 2 and 3 games and has since carried on in the novels, comic books and story of the current game. The depth and detail of the story and lore of WoW is immense. There are even YouTubers whose entire channels are dedicated to telling the story of World of Warcraft, such as Noble. Within World of Warcraft, there are many ways in which you can personalise your character. This being the race, their features of the character, the faction that you choose, and most importantly, the class that you play. For me, class identity in World of Warcraft is something that is special that Blizzard has been able to create within the game. This was seen most notably in the Legion expansion, where there were class order halls, where both factions would gather in one place in peace, as the class was more important than the faction. And going even deeper, Blizzard has created an identity for players within the class that they play through the specialisation systems. This was also seen with the Legion artifact weapons. However, the idea of spec identity was apparent far before Legion. Understandably, class and spec identity doesn't matter at all to some players. They want to play the class or the spec that does the most damage, the best healing, or is the strongest tank. This may be the case for a select few amount of players. However, I believe that the majority of players do want to play the class and the spec that they like the most. Now, I am a big advocate for play the game that you want to play, to a point of course. When I was running a guild and we were moving into the next expansion, while building our raid team, I had numerous members ask what we needed to fill our roster. I was constantly bombarded with questions such as, should I play a mage or should I play an elemental shaman, or should I play a rogue or should I play a demon hunter, and many things like that. And the answer was always the same to these players: just play what you want to play. Forcing someone to play a certain class or spec or role that they do not want to simply for the good of the raid is something that the top 0.5% of raiding guilds do. Unless you're planning on clearing the top mythic raids in the first week of release, you should certainly lose that attitude. If you're struggling to clear heroic raids and forcing people to play something that they don't want to for the good of the raid, then you're a dick. Just remember to play what you want to play. I think the idea of class identity really became noticeable for me around the time of the launch of Classic. The initial trigger for the thought was that I just returned to Classic and I needed to change spec for raid, and I was currently not spec'd for Holy. I'd been gone a few months, so I didn't think that the respec build would be that costly. However, it was around 20 gold. Now this is fine if it's a one-off expense, or something that you just do once in a blue moon. But if you're constantly respecing in Classic WoW, you can run up quite a tab very quickly. Throughout this, it made me think that yes, generally most players do keep the same spec for quite a long time. Respecing constantly is too expensive, so a player will have that one spec and that does sort of become their sense of identity within the game. As a paladin, I was expecting to heal, and I do heal. That's what I wanted to do. However, there are a handful of players, at least on my realm, who are playing ret and prot paladins. And judging by their gear, they play that spec a lot. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that these players are devoted to that specialisation. That is their class and spec identity within the game. If we fast forward to retail WoW as it is now, as long as you're in a rest area, you can freely change your talents and spec at no cost at all. Not only is this simple and painless, but it is accompanied by the fact that now that armour and items that you wear change their primary stats to suit your current specialisation. So if I am Holy and then I respec to Retribution, my armour changes from strength based to intellect based. Although I may be a Holy Paladin and heal in raids and dungeons, as long as I have a two-handed weapon in my bags, I can easily switch to Retribution and DPS at no cost or difficulty at all. And from this, as you can see, we begin to lose the spec identity. Instead of being a Holy Paladin, I simply am a Paladin. Gear is easy enough to come by that I can easily change to Ret DPS, or even tank if need be. Specializations and talents can be changed on a whim. The beginning of the end came during Wrath of the Lich King. Dual specialization was introduced into the game. This new feature allowed players to have two specs at once that they could change between. To reset them, you still had to charge and pay, however, you still had two at any given time. Now I know I did say that this was the beginning of the end, but dual specialization solved a lot of problems for certain players. Certainly the healers and tanks, who could now have a second DPS spec to help them with their dailies or questing. And I think very much like flying, these additions to the game can be a very slippery slope once it begins. In my personal opinion, how the game is now in relation to changing specs and talents hurts player spec identity, which I really cherish. Another factor that does diminish player identity is the homogenization of classes within World of Warcraft. Retail World of Warcraft provides just about every class with a form of self-healing or shielding, and this is also compounded by the fact that there's a vast amount of movement skills, and they've also provided options to optimize AoE and single target builds, allowing classes to be proficient in both whenever they are desired. Playing Classic recently, I have had people asking me to come and heal them in PvP constantly. Unless you're a class that can heal, you have no real way of healing apart from potions or bandaging in Classic. Certain spells and abilities have been removed from the game that define classes and specs. An example of this would be within the Shaman, having their totems stripped down to the bare minimum, not to mention that the class's specific interactions with the totems that they had are gone. Other examples include things such as Paladin's auras that were stripped and gone and are now talent based. Now I understand a lot of these things have been changed through expansions throughout the years, however, it's become resounding that a lot of the community are crying for a lot of these things back that have been taken away that they did find important about their class and especially their specialization. But with all that said, guys, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you still feel like you have a certain loyalty to any sort of class or any sort of spec? Or for you, does it not matter at all and you change every expansion and it's just basing on what you think is most fun, but you're not really caring about the lore or the class or anything like that? Remember to catch me streaming on twitch.tv/auraparty. I try and stream there as much as I can. And thank you very much for watching. See you later.